Yeah, welcome everyone. I think Happy New Year again. If I have not spoken to anyone, and warm welcome to everyone. I think I can see Stanley and then few people from Kivirail and also from Downer, also from different companies. Thanks again for joining. And we have two Microsoft guests. One is Eliza. She joined Microsoft recently, and Grant, who is like a senior program manager. So hopefully my screen is visible. So we are Auckland Power Platform User Group. So backed up by Greg and Hamish. So basically, this group is separated from the Dynamics and Power Platform. So we have two groups in Auckland. One is Dynamics plus Power Platform, which is led by Greg separately, and then their team. And then we agreed. Um, Greg and Hamish and the team agreed. Yes, you guys can run a separate Power Platform group. So I have been running this since 2021. So this is a grand success. Last year was really good. So we got so many good speakers across the globe, and I also want to welcome Jiva, who was helping me from last year on mega events like Global Power Platform Bootcamp and also the New Zealand Business Application Summit. And he was also like a group leader for Singapore user group, and then he moved to New Zealand a year back, and now he's also supporting me. And he kindly agreed to join this group, and also he's also one of the group leader. So please welcome Jiva as well. Just move on to another slide. So the agenda is very quite simple, and so we can see starting from housekeeping and then what we do, and then the show, which will be like obviously Grant. So the area of focus, as I said, this is completely a Power Platform user group. So we don't focus any of the Dynamics product, only the Power Platform and then the Dataverse, and sometimes the custom connectors or maybe with AI Builder, so which is all tightly related to the Dataverse product and then the Power Platform ecosystem. I need to change the Power Virtual Agent to Copilot, but it's still transforming, and I think I need to digest that and then keep changing from next month onwards. Yes, ground rule, I request everyone to go on mute, and the slide decks from Grant will be shared. Once the presentation is done, we will ask Grant to share the slide deck, and then I will pass the link to you. It will be shared in the public URL. And also, at any time, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and we can unmute yourself, or maybe like feel free to unmute and then ask a question if you have anything. And also the link is there. So this is the official Microsoft supported Power Platform user group. So that is actually backed up by few other Auckland folks and Microsoft. So they are all backing up, and so far it is a good success. So what we do, so we do currently, we are doing the monthly meetups. So speaker from across the globe, especially like MEPs and then key speakers and key experts from this area. So they were all like speaking in this group, and then sometimes it is like a bi-monthly event. Sometimes it is an in-person, and sometimes it is a hybrid. Depends on the situation. So this month it is an online event because Grant is based in States, and also as I said, we run two mega events every year, which is the New Zealand Business Application Summit, as well as the Global Power Platform Bootcamp, which is on next month, right? And then so the main purpose is upskilling, and so these people here on the call, they are like a key experts, right? And they are from Microsoft, and we are like a consumers. We are using these products heavily. So this is like a free session to upskill your knowledge and then implement in your organization. That's the idea. So these are the user group links. So on the top, which is an official Auckland Power Platform user group, and then the second one, which is the Dynamics and Power Platform user group, which is by Greg and Hamish, and then third one, which is the Wellington Dynamics from Rami. I think everyone knows Rami very well, and then Christchurch, who is from Rich, and their groups, they are also running successfully within Christchurch. I will post all the links. I think me and Jiva will share the links, and then you can keep watching the chat. So we will throw all the links in the chat, and you can subscribe. And then today the show is all about Grant, who is going to cover about the approvals kit, which is like a practical guide, and you can see like currently he's a senior program manager, and he's also part of the PowerCat team, and he's from Microsoft. So the approval kits, I think if I'm not wrong, I think Grant has an article on the official Microsoft blog, which is released on December, I believe, which contains all the link and why it is and what is this program. It is a part of automation, isn't it, Grant? So that is the one you are working on, like automation project, I believe, since September 2022. And this is one of the approvals kit is like an enhanced workflow. So, so yeah, so I will hand over to Grant to actually cover. I will stop myself, and any questions, yeah, please feel free to raise your hands, and over to you, Grant. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks for the introduction. Let me just share my screen and I'll just go through the presentation. Okay. We know where you can see it.
And can you record this, please? Like if
it's
you have.
Recorded. Yeah.
Yeah. Recorded. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm Grant Archibald. I'm a program manager in the PowerCat team. So the PowerCat team is part of the customer advisory team, part of the Power Platform engineering team. And our particular role is to kind of create open source solutions that when we talk with our large customers, address a gap in the platform that we, then work with our core engineering team to help look at, do these features make sense over time? So one of the features we've got is the approvals kit that we launched last year in public preview. And there's some links there, which you can go to later, that'll give you an idea of what the approvals kit is. There's a short 8-minute video there that kind of gives you a walkthrough of the learning module that kind of guides you through an example, which we'll go through in part of the session today. There's some guidance around how to get started if you want to just try some of the things I show today. And then we have a regular office hours that we have on the second Monday of each month. So let me kind of just jump into it. I'll give you an idea of what the approvals kit is and why we kind of created it. So if we kind of look at our telemetry around Power Automate solutions, if we look at our top customers, about 90% of those customers are already using the out-of-the-box approvals connector in part of their Power Automate flows. And given that high degree of kind of scenarios where the approvals connector is useful, we kind of looked at what are some of the scenarios where we find it useful. And some of those kind of scenarios we see is like there's the traditional kind of document approvals where you're taking a document that you're going to have someone have a look at it, run through an approval process to validate that whether or not that should be approved or rejected. Or you have those kind of human resources or other kind of processes that you want to validate. Or you'd like to include approvals as part of a bigger system. We'd want to start some process off. As a result of that process, then run through a series of stages, and at the end of that, kind of look at the outcome of that to determine what you do as the rest of the process. And generally, we see three kind of personas this kind of falls into that are involved around using automation and approvals. One, we kind of create this kind of persona called Gibson, which is more of that traditional kind of administration persona that would go through the process of setting up the Power Platform environment, setting up the policies around how the connectors work of non-business and business connectors around that, and importing and setting up the automation kit solution. The second one we've got here is kind of this persona we've got a Charlotte, which is kind of an approvals administrator, which is kind of designed to be a low-code person that wants to just go model out an approval process and maybe just use some Power Automate to go trigger an approval process and then go update the system of record at the end of the process. And then they've got the third persona is kind of Rebecca, is more somebody that just wants to go make an approval. And they're not necessarily need to, and they want to use Teams or Outlook or the Power Automate portal, but they don't need to look at the machinery of how that works. They just want to get an approval and make a decision. So we kind of see that there can be a number of kind of complicated scenarios we can kind of get if we kind of model this out across the organization. We might have the sales team or the call center team, and each of those different teams have different processes that they want to model. And these can be complicated scenarios where it may need to go to the manager or skip level manager. There may be different requirements and different thresholds they need. They may need to have kind of auditing around their approval process. So depending on who you are in this process, kind of changes your requirements in terms of how you want to model your process. And as we've kind of looked at these scenarios, this is kind of where it's kind of led us to why we kind of created the approvals kit. So out of the box, we have the pre-built approvals connector. And it's really great for basic approvals. It's generally available as part of the approvals kit, and you can use it as part of your seeded licensing. The approvals kit really is kind of builds on the approvals connector. And so it has all the functionality of the approvals connector because it uses that as part of the solution. But we bundle that together with a series of Power Apps, some Power Automate, some Dataverse components, and a custom connector to give you a pre-built starting framework to enable you to create more complicated approvals. So today it's in public preview, and one of the common questions we get is like, when will it move from public preview to GA? And the key thing in that process is really it's based on feedback from customers. We're looking for an approach that, based on feedback from you, is does it reach the quality and the requirements and the features that you need to use as part of production workloads. Once we get enough feedback from customers that it's reached that bar, we're going to move from public preview to GA. In summary, the key reason we look at for the approvals kit is how do we move just beyond basic scenarios and enable people to build more complicated scenarios, but do it in a low code way that you can go change the definition of the process you're trying to automate as part of an approval, but just by changing data. And some of the things that we enable you to model is you may want to have an approval history and use the power of Dataverse and audit logs to record that. You may want to model things like multi-stage approvals where it may go to your manager based on some particular value. You may want to handle the case that the person that is receiving the approval is out of office at the time, and they want to delegate down to someone else to do that approval while they're not available. And you may have different teams that have work on different work days or schedules that may affect when they can actually do these approvals. So you can kind of build all of these components today on the standard connector, but the top elements there are areas that you'd have to go build as custom. Whereas for the approvals kit, we could provide an out-of-the-box kind of solution to make that easier. It does build on the premium features of using Dataverse and custom connectors. So you will need the appropriate Power Apps licenses and Power Automate licenses to go set that up for depending on the persona that you're using. And I'll kind of drill into that as we go through. But hopefully it gives you a really high level view of what the approvals kit is and what some of the key differences. So what I'm going to do now is just step you through an example. So it's one of the examples we've got that comes as part of our learning module. And it's based on the app in a day Contoso coffee machine request process. And in that example, what we do is we take the name and the price of a coffee machine that you want to order, and we model it out saying, let's go confirm that the original request that you made is something that you do actually want to order that particular machine. So it goes and sends it back to the person that originally requests it. And if the value of the approval is above $400, it's going to then go send that to a manager for approval because it's above a certain threshold. And then as part of that process, when we set up the rules around this, we can say, how would we like to go set up for delegated approvers, working for work days and holidays? And all that area in that kind of black rectangular square here is kind of a part of a business approval process that at the end of that, we can go update the source system with the outcome. And this is one of the examples we've got as our learning module. So I'm just going to step you through some of that, deconstruct a bit of that. And this is your session today too. So feel free to, as I go along, to kind of ask questions around this and see how it works. After the demo, we'll just quickly kind of do a recap of what we covered and then have a look at what are some of the roadmap of key things we're looking at for the approvals kit. Okay, so let's get it out of PowerPoint and start kind of going back. So what you got when you start with the approvals kit, there's a set of learn documentation that talk about what the approvals kit is, what the expected kind of user journey of how you would use it, and how it compares with the out-of-the-box approvals connector. In this scenario, we've already gone through this process and we've set up the approvals kit and we've set up a machine ordering application where this is the Contoso coffee application where you can go request a coffee machine for home machines or commercial machines. And I'm going to pick a machine here for above $400. I'm going to select this, and I could put some justification in here, and I'm going to submit a request. So this solution, all it does and goes and saves that record into Dataverse. And we're going to go across and go have a look at what does that do. And if we come across to approvals here, this should go generate 2 approvals that came to us in that diagram. The first one should be a first self-approval check to say, did I want to go submit this coffee machine request? And the second one, because the value of this is above $400, it should send as a second request. So if I refresh this page, we'll wait a moment. So when it turns up into the portal, and this could turn up in the Power Automate portal, this could go in their Office 365 email, it could up into Teams. So depending on which channel that you want to interact with. So these are just the standard out of the box approvals functionality. So while that's waiting to do, we're just going to have a look at how does this work and how does this appear? So we've got one flow behind this that reacted to the machine orders. So when a machine order got added in the organization, it uses this custom connector. And this custom connector is taking who requested this machine, what's the name of the machine, what its price is, and it records what's the identifier for that machine. So later on, when this approval is completed, we could take that identifier and we could use that to go update the original machine request order. So we'll go back, and by now it should have received. Okay, so the first one is now been sent. So I could pick the standard connector. I could choose approve or reject. If I go reject, the whole approval process could be stopped and rejected then, or I've chosen approve, so it'll continue on the approval process. And now because it's above $400, in a few minutes, it will then send through the second request. So I configure this to go back to myself, where it's going to send me an above $400 request. So let's have a look a little bit in terms of how I did that while that's waiting to appear. So I'll refresh this page. So this is the business approval manager, which is part of the approvals kit. And we've got an approval process here where we've got the name of the machine request. We've got some parameters that are coming to this is the name and the price. It's a text and a number. And we can go publish multiple versions of this over time. So if we went back to our Power Automate flow, this was version 2. But you could go add and update this over time and publish new versions of this, and then go update your Power Automate flow here to go use a particular version of business approval workflow. And behind this, we have a process designer. And this process designer is similar to the Power Automate flow, where you can use the designer is going to zoom in and look at all the stages that make up part of this. So you can go in and see there's one first stage here, which is submit, which is submitting going back to my user, Alex Wilbur. And if that area is successful, it goes on to the next stage and says, based on the price, I want to make a choice of the second approval. So we can look at it this way, or we can go back to the classic designer, which is the same kind of view of it. It's just using older kind of canvas controls to replicate the same thing. So over time, we're looking to move towards the modern designer because we've got feedback that people like to be able to zoom in and get a view of if they've got more complicated approvals over time. But the same information is rendered whether or not you use the classic designer or the modern designer. So the value of this is above $400. We can open up one of these nodes. In the node, we can define who would we like to go. What's the name of the stage? What are the decisions around? Does everyone want to approve, or you want to wait with a custom response? Who are the approvals you want? And you can go choose your rules around, do you want to handle things like, if it times out, go to your delegate. If you're out of office, go to who you configured as your delegate, or if either of those two events occur. If we go back to the approval now, we should see the second approval that's turned up. And so the second one's now turned up with above $400. So the idea of this is it's stringing together the multiple approvals that you would need to do in a Power Automate process yourself. So we have a number of Power Automate flows behind this process and Dataverse tables that model this end-to-end workflow. And if you want to know more about how that works, you can go to our content page and you get an idea of our high-level architecture in terms of how we model our design timetables, where you model what the overall process is here. You then can go through the process of publishing this. We can then have a version of this definition. And then for every record approval that you create, it then goes and creates a set of runtime tables. We can go track all the stages and nodes. And that's kind of kicked off by this custom connector. So we give an example as via Power Automate, but it's a custom connector. We could use other parts of the Power Platform to initiate this. And then you could go report on this because this is based on Dataverse. You could report on the overall state of all the approvals in your environment. So that's the high level end-to-end piece of what we've got. Any questions there just around this overall process first? Because there's a number of concepts I went through. So that basically, in summary, we went through Charlotte as the designer could go through and model this process of the different stages, and there could be any number of stages here, and it will keep evaluating each of these stages until it reaches that there's no more further stages and nodes to evaluate. And then at the end of that, we'll update the outcome of saying it's completed or rejected. And then we could go create another Cloudflow. So if I go back out of this, go back to the flows. So in the solution here, I've created a Contoso Coffee approvals solution that goes alongside the approval for the business flow. So in this Contoso Coffee approvals, I've got two Cloudflows. One of them that was used to initiate to start a business approval, and I've got a second one that goes and updates the original Dataverse machine orders table. So this one's, again, very simple. It just goes and listens for changes to one of the tables that are inside the approvals kit. And this is a business approval workflow table. And when every one of those is modified, it just goes and does a check saying, is the instance variable saying what's the status of this approval? If it's completed, then we want to just go update the record in Dataverse, looking at using the supplied external reference. And we want to go update the approval status of that to approve. And this could be any connector. So in this case here, we're using Dataverse as the source and destination system, but you could be updating any other system based on the external reference that you supply. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the end-to-end process. It's a very simple example, but what we do is part of this process, and we'll go through this in a minute, in terms of, what is your learning path to understand that? And everything I went through today is pretty much part of the overall Learn Workshop module that we've got as part of the approvals kit. That's one of the first things we've done as PowerCat, to do a structured learning path that'll guide you through the process of getting the solution working, creating that first approval workflow, triggering the process of doing an approval, adding those multiple conditions and stages that I showed, and then look at how you do with delegation out of office, and just give you a knowledge check at the end of the process. So what we're looking for is hopefully this becomes an easy thing to get started and understand how the approvals kit works, and getting feedback from you in terms of, does this go far enough for you? Is there additional things that you'd like to see as a more structured learning path just beyond this initial kind of guide into the approvals kit? So I'll pause there for any questions.
Yeah.
And Nathan's got a question.
Yeah.
Fire away, Nathan.
You're on mute.
I'm an idiot. I usually complain about those people. Facepalm. Thanks for taking us through that. It's really cool. So I just want to make sure I'm clear. The business approval workflow, that's a custom table. So when I install the approvals kit, that business approvals workflow gets installed into my Power Platform environment, and that's the core table that I'm working with.
Yeah. Correct. So it's based on,
Yep.
we package this on the Power Platform. So it's a managed solution, or an unmanaged solution you can download from our GitHub site.
Yep.
It will install itself as a set of Dataverse tables.
Yep.
There's that Power App. So this Process Designer app here is a model-driven application.
Yep.
And there is a set of Power Automate flows that guide that watch for changes in these tables and guide the process through here and create the multiple approvals that get sent out.
Okay. So presumably you could use this with like low-code plugins as well, since it's in Dataverse.
Yeah, there's multiple ways that you could drive this. If you want to put a low-code plugin to initiate to go create those records, that is an option you could do.
Challenge accepted.
Welcome to look at additions. I'd love to see how you'd like to talk about it. I mean, at the moment, we're triggering this via Power Automate. People may say, hey, what if I want to go generate this from a Copilot? That could be another way that you may want to trigger this. So there could be multiple ways that you may want to interact with this, but at the end of the day, it's triggered by adding records to these Dataverse tables.
Yeah.
And that's what the custom connector is doing for you. It's just creating the records in these definition tables so that when you pass data in from this connector, it goes and creates the runtime instance tables to track the process from end to end.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Thank you.
So hopefully that gives an idea. So you can go through here. If you want to dig deeper into it, you can look at, how our cloud flows work, what each of those cloud flows do, what the definitions of our tables are, and how they kind of interact. And then just dive into our data model in terms of, how does our data model hang together?
Got one more question from Angel. Go on.
Hi, Angel.
Hi. Again, thanks for the session. Probably need to kind of like look like a mystery guy here. But anyway, I'll just go into my question. On the delegation, if you go to the screen where there's the delegation control.
Let me go. So when you're adding a node here, there's just two ways in delegation. One is, this is one here. When you create a node, you make a choice of, do I want a delegation rule? So that's just saying, at the stage here, I would like to go say that I want to delegate if I'm out of office. So I just define the rule here. And what we can do is I'll just close out of this for a second, and I'm going to go back to the approvals center. And in the approvals center, you can go track the status of the approvals. So I can go through that in a moment in terms of what that looks like. But in my basic settings, I get an idea of like, who are the people that I would like to delegate to? And I would like to delegate to Adele. So this will go look up people out of your Active Directory, and then you could go choose that person as to be your delegate or a backup. And then I could say, look, I'm out of office at the moment, and save those changes. So given I'm out of office, if I'm an approver in the process, it will now delegate those approvals to Adele. And I could likewise go set up a work profile, the number of days in a week that I work, or maybe there's some different holidays that I observe where I am. And as a result of that, it will honor those when it kind of looks at, who should I send my approval to? Does that answer your question?
Yep. And I didn't see the option that there's an or, because I thought it was just timeout or out of office. And then I saw that there was an option to timeout or out of office. So that was my question. The last one is there, in terms of the app templates, it's like, so everyone would have to develop their own app, or is there like a standard template as well for like, because like some approvals, like the coffee machine app is a bit specific, but some of it might just be, most approvals are kind of pretty standard. Is there like a template for the apps as well, or is this mainly on the Power Automate side in terms of how it works?
Good question. So I mean, the idea of it is we want to keep the actual amount of Power Automate relatively simple. So that's generally going to be selecting data from your system and passing to some parameters and starting the approval process, whatever that is. And then in here, the idea of this is you can go take the information that's been passed in and you can model your workflow. So it's kind of independent of Power Automate, and you could go model whatever process. Today, we don't have any out-of-the-box templates that come with it. It's something we're looking on our backlog and would like to get feedback from customers saying, how important is that for you? Would you like to just go use the process designer to model a process that makes sense for you? Or are there, if you're trying to do a standard purchasing order approval process, do you want to start with a template and go modify that? So at the moment, you're going to create multiple stages. And so you can add a new stage and go through and name that stage and look at, is it an if else, or are there switch statements? So there's different various things you could do to go model your approval process.
Cool. Thanks for that.
Okay, hopefully that answers the question.
It did. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to jump back for a moment and go back in terms of like, how do you get started with this for a second? And let me just bring up current slide. Okay. So I went through a lot of common concepts there pretty quickly. And one of the common questions we get is like, how do I start this? How do I learn on this process? So we see three kind of levels of learning paths. One is just like understanding, hey, what is the approvals kit? What can it do for me? I want to get hands-on with it. So there's kind of links in this top left area are links that you can use. So you can go through the guidance and documentation, figure out how to, work with your administrator if you need to go set that up, or go create a demo environment where you're an administrator of that environment and go set that up. You can join our office hours. Again, from a Asia Pacific time zone, those will be difficult because it's at 7 a.m. Pacific to 8 a.m. Pacific, though we are going to record those calls, and you could go look at the recordings of those also from an Asia Pacific time zone point of view. The next stage we're going to see is like running through that learning path I showed, where you can run through that structured learning path, get an idea of how do you go build, get familiar with the concepts of the approvals kit, and then go take those concepts to say, how do you go model that with your business process? And that third process, like, okay, now that you've taken a learning path through that, then how do I go help this with people inside my organization? So the idea of we're trying to do with the third part with the instructor guide is say, how would I help a group of 20 or 30 people go through the process of learning the approvals kit? And how would we go set up, say, 30 developer environments and go set up those environments with the approvals kit, the Contoso Coffee application, and then use them to guide through it. So you could run through a cohort of people through that training. So hopefully that's three kind of levels there. Happy to answer any questions that, but that's just some examples of some of the learning paths that we see as people go through the approvals kit. But normally we kind of start with that learning module where you can kind of go through that structured learning path. So one of the things we're kind of looking for here, especially as a PM for me, is this hitting the mark? Is this too complex? Is it not complex enough? Is there more, would you like to go through a more complicated example? Say, how would I integrate with a Power Automate desktop to do something? Would you like to show how a Copilot or Power Pages could initiate one of these processes? And so the next one is just, I just want to go through and have a look at what's next. And just give you an idea as we're kind of going into public preview, gone from public preview, what are some of the things that we're looking at next? So one of the things we did in January is we made an investment in just using this new modern designer. The reason we invested in that is we've now got the ability, this is a PCF control, and because this PCF control, so a JavaScript control inside our custom page, and it gives us the ability to control how we show and visualize the approval process. So we can go overlay this. We'll say, if I want to go see the status of, here's a instance of this, and I want to go imagine where there could be green ticks or red crosses through this to show you what the status of this is as if you're looking at an approval that's in process. So it's going to give us the ability to kind of get some fine-grained control in terms of how we display this, which is more difficult if we chose the classic designer. And there's three things I just want to look at is for those three personas in terms of areas. And it'd be good to get feedback from the people on the call today is like, how important are these things for you? So the first one is looking at that approvals administrator. And these are kind of 5 features that we've seen that are more of the person that's designing that approval process. So the first one kind of meets like, if we had a template, if you'd like to go take a template and go copy that and then go change that. So that's that kind of copy save as. The next one is looking at notifying the requester. So as you go through the nodes and stages, you might say, I want to go notify the person that requested this and tell them what stage it's at as it moves through the process. The third one is when you did the approvals, you notice I picked, I chose myself as the approver. One of the feedback we had is we'd like to go choose a security group as the list of approvers. So anyone in that approval, that security group can get sent the approval rather than having to go choose individual user accounts out of Entra. The last two ones are kind of related. One is around scheduling reminders. So say, for example, I had an approval that needed to be done by Friday and 5 days out before that, I'd like to go send, hey, this is due by the end of the week. And then in the middle of the week, you might say, hey, you've got 2 days left to do it. And a day before, you might want to say, hey, this is due tomorrow. And at each of those stages, the ability to go change the text of that. So what we're thinking about there is, could we apply a PowerFX formula very similar to the way the Dataverse Accelerator works with low-code plugins, where you could go define a PowerFX expression that would enable you to define what the text you'd like to go send as that scheduled reminder. The last one is in terms of, if we kind of aren't getting a response in a certain time period, would you like to go escalate that to someone else to make sure you meet a particular deadline? The next persona, kind of looking at that approval persona, today we're still basing our approvals on the static approval process that turns up in the Power Automate portal, in your mobile app, or in Teams. So these here would make that process a bit more dynamic. So we're thinking in this case here, could we take advantage of something like a power card, that we could go supply your power card in this process, where you could then go show, here's all the history of approvals that are related to this or similar approvals? Or would you like to make, if you've got, say, time off requests, you might want to approve multiple time off requests in one approval process rather than going through each one going accept or decline. And the third lot is looking at it from an administrator side. So that we're working on a process to move this to AppSource. So similar to the way the Creator Kit works today, we want to extend that out for the Approvals Kit so that you can go through and install the Approvals Kit into an environment from AppSource. And then as we make changes, you could go upgrade as part of that process as we update it. The second one that'll take us a little bit longer, but we're looking at also, is making a certified connector. So you could include this as part of your connectors and put that into your business or non-business groups. So I'll pause there, and it'll be good to kind of get feedback from people around those areas, around those personas, like what is most important to you as you kind of look through this process, either out of the approvals administrator, across the approval persona, or the administrator persona. And are there other things out of any of those three personas that are also important that you think is part of this process? Is there any comments out of the chat there?
Yeah, not related to this slide, the previous one. So when you mentioned about how do you actually install it to the multiple environments? So is it like a Power Platform admin can only do this task, or do we need to be the environment admin for every environment what we want?
A great question. So today, as part of the setup for it, you will need to be an environment administrator to install it. The reason you can't be the system customizer is we do have some Dataverse plugins as part of this, and we have a custom connector. And as a result, you'll need to be an environment administrator to do the install into the environment. But once it's installed, you just go share the application and the tables with the users, and it's a standard sharing process.
I see. And is there any direct relationship between the managed environment and approval kits, or is it part of any of your future scoping?
It is just a solution, just you to get to choose whether or not you want a managed environment for changes, managed solution, or an unmanaged solution. So it's just like any other standard Power Platform solution. You just make a choice of which solution you want to install. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
So today you install this via our GitHub repository, so you can go download it. Like if you're familiar with the Center of Excellence kit, it's a similar process to go download and install it. And we're looking to improve on it very similar to the way the Creator Kit works, where we'll extend AppSource, so you can just go see a listing for the approvals kit. It will then be installed as another Dynamics 365 application in your Power Platform Admin Center, and then you can choose which environment you'd like to go install it into.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Grant. Awesome solution here. I just got a question. When it comes to the pipeline, how does this move with each environment? Do we have to reapply for each environment, or will it just move automatically?
Okay, so you're meaning more if you want to go apply this from a I'm just go back to this content page here. So you're going to say if you want to go apply your pipelines Power Platform and you want to go move this from development to test to production, is that kind of the scenario? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so today it is very similar to the way that Pages works, that we store our definition in Dataverse tables. So if you want to go move a solution, a business approval workflow between environments, you just copy the records between environments. So it's not a solution per se, so you don't wrap it up in a solution. But you would need to, like, if you go back to my example I was working on before, go back out here. So I had the Contoso Coffee approvals process where I started and finished that. And I've gone to solutions here. So my Contoso Coffee approvals would still need to go through your standard approvals process to go move this Contoso Coffee approvals between development, test, and production. So because this one has the Cloudflow and the connection references to Dataverse in this solution. So that would still need to go through your standard deployment pipeline. The actual definition of the actual machine, that machine requests process is just Dataverse records. So it's a kind of combination of two. So there's this, you still need to move these elements here, which is the minimal amount to go trigger an approval process and then maybe update it at the end of the process. And that would just be a standard solution, which you could package up and deploy between environments. And then if you want to move the actual definition of that machine request, that would be the Dataverse records that you'd move between environments. Hopefully that clarifies the two pieces.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The data
So-
and the surrounding solution.
Gotcha. So, could you also say, not that it's recommended, but could you also say, the plugins and perhaps where you can specify which environment it works on? Could you also use it in parallel with that?
Can you give me an example? So
in Power Automate, there is a new connector that basically allows you to do any of the Dataverse actions, but specify which environment it's working in.
Okay.
Could you do the same with this?
You could do, yeah. I mean, so you could use the new Dataverse connector to say, okay, I'd like to go insert this approval into environment A and have the approval process happen there. Or I want it in environment B. So I assume that's what you're meaning there, that in the moment the custom connector works within, it assumes it's in the same environment because it's going back to the same Dataverse instance. So this custom connector is a wrapper over Dataverse. If you want to go from a different environment, you would need to use the Dataverse connector to create these runtime instance tables that would initiate a approval process in that environment. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. And you could look at the way that our custom connector works. This is a custom page behind our custom connector, and you can see the process that we use to go set up the runtime instance tables.
You also mentioned about the Copilot thing, so which is not yet explored, isn't it? So we need to figure out.
Yeah,
what
I think there's two ways that we've got there. One is just using Copilot itself. So if you want to have a Copilot conversation and you'd like to call a Power Automate flow as part of that, which you'd like to start an approval process, that's one possible path. There's other things we're looking at on the backlog itself is how would we use Copilot itself as the authoring experience? So could we use Copilot in this process here to say, I'd like to go add another stage to this if this manager approval is rejected, for example. So we don't have a Copilot experience for the design experience, but from a overall workflow process, you could put a Copilot that could call Power Automate that could start off one of these approval processes.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, looks like a great tool for us, what we are aiming for the business.
Yeah, and I think really like we're early in the process, so really what we're actively looking for is feedback around what are the important things for you. Does it meet what you're needing? Are there additional features like I had on the backlog I kind of talked about there that would be really important for you before you could use it in a production environment? So that's the main thing I had today, but I'm happy to go through any of the kind of details that I had around, how the kit kind of fits together, what some of the paths we see, or what are some of the kind of common things we see that people kind of had a little bit of a roadblock in terms of installing it for the first time. So I could talk through that if people want to go through the more of the admin kind of setup side of this. Nathan.
Oh yeah, if you wouldn't mind going through the GitHub install process. I was just taking a look and I was a little lost. I've not done anything via GitHub before, so
Sure, let me just
that
go.
would be really good.
Let's go to, so we're going to go approvals kit GitHub. And so this is our open source repository for the approvals kit. So it's very similar to if you've previously done the COE kit, we've got a releases section here. If you go to releases, you can see these are all our releases, and you could go put a notification here that will send you a notification every time we make a release. Every release we give an update. So these are the key changes that we've got in this release. So this is for our January release. And down the bottom of this, we've got a series of assets here. And normally it's these two here, either you make a choice. I'd like to go download the managed solution or the unmanaged solution. So normally most customers go download the managed solution because it makes it easiest for them to go get updates each month. If you choose the unmanaged solution, for example, if you want to go modify that, but if you make modifications to it, it'll make possibly the process of updating between our releases more difficult.
Yep.
If you choose the unmanaged solution, you could also go look at that and maybe take apart and see how do we go build this. The rest of this in this GitHub repository, if you go back and you will say, okay, how did we go build this? These other folders here, look through the business approval kit, and these are the different components that actually make up the solution.
Okay.
So normally what you do is go grab the release, you'd then go download this zip file. The next thing you're going to do is you'd come back to the setup page here. In the setup page, you go, okay, just make sure that you've got the right Power Platform licenses and you have the right permissions to install it. So in this case here, you're going to need a Power Automate license for the Cloud Flows, and you'd need a license for the Power Apps to go run that. So we've got, if we through the different personas, we've got an idea of these are the possible licenses that you may need. So an approver may just want to use Office 365, or if they're actively interacting with a Power App, they may also need a Power Apps license for that. The approval administrator is going to need a Power Apps license, or per user, per app, or pay as you go. The maker is going to probably need a Power Automate Premium to go build their Cloud Flows. And the administrator may want to assign a Power Automate license for the backend Cloud Flows it uses to move the approvals through the process. You'll just go through, you'll download that, so you create an environment, and you can go install so you can go through a manual install. So you can go set it up, you can go to Dynamics 365
just
apps.
into the Maker portal and kind of kick it old school.
Yeah, so at the moment we just have it via that. So once we put app source will be easier because you can go to the app source as an administrator. You can elect, say, I would like to install the approvals kit into your list of Dynamics 365 apps. And once it's installed there, you can choose how to set it up. I can show you that in a moment. So you go to do not, in this case here is once you go to the Power Platform Administration Center, you can go choose Microsoft Flow approvals, install that into environment. So it has a dependency on the out-of-the-box Flow system, so you can install that into your environment. And you'll need the Creator Kit installed because we use some of the controls out of the Creator Kit. So once you've got the Flow installed and you've got the Creator Kit installed, then you can go to the GitHub site. You can go get the managed solution, go to Power Apps. You then go to Solutions, you go Import, and you get the zip file off your local system, and then go select your connections, and then it'll go through the import process. After you've done that, you'll go through the process of setting up the custom connector. And this is where we find most customers have that first initial friction with this, because you need to go to your Microsoft Entra or Azure Active Directory team and talk to them about creating an app registration, where you give it permissions to go talk to Dataverse and the Microsoft Graph. And you're going to need to grant admin consent for that so that the connector can go use this app registration. Once you've got this app registration, you've set it up, and you've given it admin consent, you'll get a client ID and secret for that. And you can go back to the custom connector, and that's where you'll go into your Dataverse instance and the client ID and secret you've got. You'll go through your security tab and validate that what that looks like. So if people aren't familiar with that, I'll just quickly show you what that looks like. So in the Power Automate portal, I go Discover All, and I can go pick Custom Connectors. There's my Approvals Kit connector that'll get imported as part of the solution. I open up the information around that. I put in the host of my environment. I go through the security settings of my client ID and secret that I've registered.
Yep.
And then I go across the test, and I get this Get Published Workflows, and I'll create a connection the first time. So when I have this new connection, it'll create a connection to my custom connector and my Dataverse beneath that.
Okay, so
go,
sorry, Grant. So all
Sure.
I have to do is set up the authentication, and the rest of the custom connectors there for me.
Yeah, so if you come through here, I'll just come back. This is what the process would look like. If you come by the Power Automate portal or the Power Apps portal, it's the same. So if I'm just opening up solutions here, wait for this to come back. Okay, so I go solutions, and if I have the zip file on my system that I've downloaded from GitHub,
Yep.
and if I go import on this, so I go import solution, I go
Yep.
browse to a file, I'd get the download file that I want to get, like or Contoso Coffee or the app. Then you'd go through this, open it up. So it's Contoso Coffee, the same if I do the approvals kit.
Yep.
Choose the connections, and then it would go through the process. This one's already installed. Okay. It's already there. So once it's installed, then you'll come back to manage your custom connector, follow the guide, create a connection, and then verify you get a 200 request like this.
Yep. Okay.
So if you're in a 200 request, you're in a good place. You've got the kit installed, you've gotten set up your app registration, you've given it the right permissions, and you should be able to get a test operation that returns success there. And then from there, you could go build your Cloudflow like I did here to initiate the process. And then you go into the process designer to start modeling out your process.
Awesome. I'm excited about this. I can't wait to get hands-on.
So yeah, hopefully that gives you a super quick idea there. I skipped over kind of the details of that, but hopefully the guide there will step you through what are the key steps you'd need as part of that process.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
No problem.
Go on, intro if you have a question.
It's going to be the same question, but this time, just I assume you're going to have to do the same process for each environment.
Correct. You'd need it in each environment. You're going to need the connector, the custom connectors registered for each environment if you want to use the custom connector. If you want to do something like, hey, I want to go create some kind of process that could go to any number of environments, you could use the Dataverse connector directly and go insert into our tables. So the custom connector is there as a convenience to make it simple. So it is just inserting into those instance records for you, so you don't have to go do the lookups for parameters and things like that. The reason we put the custom connector in is it just makes this process of creating these runtime instance tables simpler. So if you use this, you'll register a custom connector on each environment. And you can say, for example, go create a different secret for different environments if you want to go handle key rotations separately for each of those environments. So you could go create one application ID and create, say, 5 different secrets and use those secrets across the different connectors in different environments.
Right, that's awesome. The other thing as well is, since it does create a Dataverse instance, do you also, is there like another learn page where it shows how to set permissions for different users?
Yeah. So it's based on Dataverse permissions in terms of, like, obviously the permissions for those tables that will be based on security roles that you have there. So you could put a custom security role if you wanted to lock it down to particular users that want to go right to those particular tables. So at the moment, we assume when you share it and you share permissions for the app that you share these particular tables there. It'd be good to get feedback if you wanted to be more specific and granular around the rights to those tables and environment. Or you might want to say, I want to have an isolated environment strategy where, because these approvals are sensitive, you might say, I want to ring fence this entire environment for this. So it depends on what your environment strategy would look like.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
No problems. Okay, yes, so we're getting close on time, but
yeah,
any other questions?
Just on that same thing, Grant. So is there a improvement you can do from your side? just like, the installing custom connector in each environment, which is a pain for us. Like, sometimes we miss few things, and it's very hard to test and then move between different environments. Like usually it's a 4 or 5 environments for each project, and then it's really like a pain for us.
Yeah, one of the you raise a good point. So one of the things that we have done, and that's where if you're going to look at I'm just going to come back to the nurture path. So one of the things that we looked at as part of this instructor guide is how do you automate that process? So we've got a process in there that goes through, in the case of demo environments, to go set that up, or where there's a known system user, it can go through and create that. There does need to be some kind of interactive user because you are creating consents for creating things. But the instructor guide we have experimented with it in terms of how do we automate some of these processes of installing it.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Just a last question before we wind up.
When you update the actual connector, do you also specify in GitHub when you re-upload it to the environments? Do you upgrade or update it?
If you do an upgrade between each month, you'll do an upgrade. So when you get, if you've got an earlier version, say for example, once we release the February release, and if you had installed the January release, it will say you want to upgrade the solution between versions. And that's the advantage also as we go to app source, that process will be easier. You can say, I'd like to do auto update. So today, as you make a update, you'll kind of say, okay, you make a choice. If you take the January release, or maybe you might take the March release as the next one, you can make a choice of saying when you want to go upgrade the environment. So you're in control of when you take the releases. We generally stay within 3 months of the latest release so that you don't get too far behind. Though if you go for app source, that would be something you can opt into saying, I'd like to go take auto updates just to reduce the administrative burden of updating the different versions of the approvals kit as they get released. Hopefully that answers your question.
100%, yeah.
Fantastic.
Hey, Grant, one more thing
Sure.
to add. In the Learn documentation, there's the recommendation to create a dedicated Dataverse environment for the approvals kit. Do you want to explain why that is, in case someone is thinking about that? Like, why is it recommended to have a dedicated environment?
I think it really comes down, it comes to a classic, it depends. It depends on your strategy, like how sensitive these approvals are, what your audience is going to be. So in your environment strategy, do you want to have this dedicated because it's just approvals and then you want to ring fence it out? Or is this something that you might want to tie for a particular business unit? So it depends on the scope of what you want to do, as I'd say. If that needs to be clear around the documentation around, some of the choices you've got around there, but generally I'd say that generally falls into your general environment strategy in terms of how you'd want to go deploy the Power Platform and what the scope of the approvals needs to be. And then obviously outside that, then there'd be the normal, if you're applying development, test, or production, what's the process you'd use to go move those solutions through a pipeline? Hopefully, did that cover it, Eliza? Any other things you were thinking about that I missed in that?
No, that's all good. But yeah,
Okay.
Just wanted to also highlight to everyone that, am I right in remembering that you can't use the default environment?
Unless you've got data, because it will rely on the premium. Again, a lot of that will depend on how you've set it up. It will need Dataverse enabled, and you will need the custom connectors. So normally people would put a data loss prevention policy that would disable custom connectors and or any of the connectors that are used there. And as a result, you'd need to have an environment that has a data loss prevention policy with the connectors that you need. So if you've got a default environment that has got those capabilities installed, so if you have Dataverse and you have the ability to install custom connectors, you could do. Or you might make a choice to say, depending on your environment strategy, you may want to put it into a different environment as long as it's got those prerequisites of the connectors that we use in the approvals kit. Okay. So kind of nearly at time. Again, thank you for your time today. I really look forward to just people just using the approvals kit, getting people's feedback. I think, and I say the most important thing for me is, getting your feedback, getting feedback from you in terms of, is this kind of meeting the bar that would be useful for you, you'd like to use in a production environment, and using that as a way to go, can we move it from public preview to GA at that point?
Sure. Again, fantastic session, Grant. Thank you so much, and thank you, Eliza. It's really a great session, and thank you everyone for joining. Thanks for your time today. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yes.
See you,
Bye.
Grant.
Right.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.